Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the platform John Pendergrass, facilitating the Unified Transformation Panel. Our panelists include Foswa Booker-Drew, Byron Sanders, Jerry Wagner, and Noel Boucher.
Good evening. How's everybody doing out there? Good. I've got a question for everybody. How are y'all doing? Doing well. Good, good. I've got a question. How many of you guys have ever played the game Mafia? Just listen. Yeah. Well, they chose me to moderate because I'm the king of moderating Mafia. And I figured if I can do that, I can definitely do this. And it would be awesome if we could all play a game together, but probably take us about a year to figure out who the three of you are who are the Mafia people. Be a lot of fun. Man, I've got a question for you guys before we get started. Do I look like Conan O'Brien to you guys?
Yes.
I'm going to share a story with everybody before we get started. I've been here all day, and I know there's a scripture where it says we entertain angels unaware. But I think there's an angel floating around. If you're the elderly gentleman who kept screaming out today, Conan! Conan O'Brien! I was like, I know he's not talking to me. Justin Timberlake, maybe, but Conan O'Brien. All right, we're on a time budget here. These are my friends. We do life with each other. That's exciting. But you're also looking at some of the most influential movers and shakers in Dallas right now. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be sitting up here on this panel with you guys. And I'm blessed and honored also to call you guys friends.
Thanks,
so,
John.
Jerry, if you guys also, you have a Movement Day booklet. If you'll go to the back, I would love to introduce them all, but due to time, I can't. But look and see what they do, and I think you'll be very impressed. So, Jerry, I want to start out with you, man. There is a lot going on right now in the news, and all of us who have been kind of keeping an eye out on this whole racial word, the word racial unity. We've been talking about it a lot today, and the reason why I'm going to bring it back up is because there's a new crowd here. And, Jerry, it's 2015, man, and we're living in Dallas, Texas, and we've been talking about this quite a bit. Why does it seem like the word racial unity, almost as if it's a new concept here in Dallas, but wasn't this always God's plan at the beginning? Anyway, why are we talking about it like it's something new?
Yes. First, if I call him Teddy Pendergrass, don't get mad, you know. See,
I can't see
they too
like
young. None of the young people got that. They're like, Teddy Pendergrass, who is that? Turn them off. No, okay. No, man, listen, yes. I think the reason why it still feels new is because we've had conversations about it. The problem is we haven't acted upon the conversations that we done had. And I think what the Michael Brown situation did was expose the church of how far we are in the racial reconciliation. And not only did it expose the church, it showed how silent we have been. You know, I was watching a panel, and one of the prominent speakers who were during the time of Martin Luther King, Caucasian brother, they asked, where were you on the day that Martin Luther King got shot? He said, well, I was with some brothers hanging out. He said, what did y'all do? They said, absolutely nothing. And I think that's why we're still here in 2015 talking about racial issues, because we talk about it, but there's no action. And I think if anything, what Michael Brown's situation showed us as an eruption of past issues is not cool to be silent anymore. And it's not cool to just sit in churches with people that look like us, talk like us, act like us, walk like us. Those days are gone. And we don't have to wait to heaven. I know in Revelation it said that John saw a great multitude of people.
That's right.
But the reality of it is we don't have to wait to the eschaton. We can start living that out right now. Amen. And so that's why me and you are homeboys. That's right. You can come on my house, eat brisket.
I do.
Greens, cornbread.
I will. Talking about cornbread.
But that's why we haven't reacted to the conversation we done had.
All right. So you said a lot of powerful things there, man. But we're talking about a city transform, and that's what Movement Day is all about, is we're coming together. I mean, I think John Edmonds said it this morning, is this is the closest thing to heaven. I think we're closer to heaven today by the people sitting in this room, and I agree. But why is diversity so crucial to seeing our city transformed, in your opinion?
The reason being is because I think we want the world to be unified, but the church isn't unified. And how are we going to ask a world that is constantly watching to do something that we as a church is not even doing? Secondly, wasn't this the prayer that Jesus prayed in John 17?
That's right.
I pray that they would be one, just as the Father and I are one. And not only that, in Ephesians chapter 2, remember, I tore down the wall of hostility, that there's no longer Jew or Gentile, but there's one new community. And how foolish would it be for us not to unite as brothers and sisters and be in a world that, listen, I'm not waiting for my daughters to do the work. I'm not waiting for my sons to do the work. I'm going to pave the path that it will be normal to be in a multi-ethnic, multicultural church where we can do gospel music, we can have nappy hair, we can eat. That's going to be normal. And you know why? If you want racial unity, it has to be close proximity. You know why? Because if I look to the right of me and I see a white brother, if I look to the left of me and I see a Latino brother, you know what we begin to realize? That we all need Jesus Christ.
Amen. Thank you, Jerry. And Jerry always says in church, hug somebody that doesn't look like you. And I'm the white dude with red hair, and everybody comes and hugs on me. Francois. Everybody say Francois. I like saying your name. I really, really do. I get excited just being able to be up here and do this. But Francois.
It's a Christian show. Remember that. Don't get too excited. She is the National Director of World Vision. She serves as one of their National Directors for World Vision. The woman, I was going to print off her bio, but my printer ran out of paper because she literally has a 400-page bio of all the accomplishments that the Lord has used her to do. But Francois, we have a challenge on our hands here in Dallas. The gap is ever widening between the haves and the have-nots. And I'm really learning and reading, because I read a lot, the city of Dallas is important to me as well, that we're at the top of the list. I think we're ranked number 4, just below Detroit, with how many people are living at or below poverty. Now, we live in Dallas, Texas. We've got a lot of wealth here, and we've got beautiful bridges and new roads and all this infrastructure. What are we missing here? What are we missing? You know, there's several things. I think one, it's understanding the history of Dallas. When you think about many cities in the South especially, they had real movements, civil rights movements. And Dallas really didn't have the kind of bloodshed that you saw in some other parts of the country. And part of what happens in those kinds of situations is reconciliation. You have to have some healing when you go through that. In Dallas, what typically happens is we go behind closed doors and have meetings, and people go, it's okay. Yeah. And cover it up, and we really don't deal with it. So there's some historical baggage that has to be unpacked for us to really have these conversations. And I think that's the key, it's the conversation piece. I think folks assume that poverty is over there.
Yeah. And
we look at it as an international issue and say, well, people here are lazy. And it has nothing to do with that. No one wakes up one morning and goes, God, I love starving to death. This is great. I enjoy being hungry and not having anything. No one wants that. All of us, regardless of race, want to have good things for our children and want them to have advantages and benefits that we may not have had. And so what happens is, in the disconnect, is because we don't have conversation. So people don't get to see what happens in South Dallas and see, you know, they go, oh, it's over there and those people are poor. Not seeing that there's some great, thriving organizations and people that are doing good work, but need not a handout, but need help in walking together. And so I think there are assumptions and misaligned expectations that people have of one another. And the way we stop that is beginning to have the conversation and spending time and not just feeding people on Thanksgiving. People are hungry all year round. And it makes me really angry to think people feel good about themselves. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do, but backpacks is another thing. Do you think kids keep those same pencils and paper in January?
No.
And so it has to be consistent and it has to be relationship building. So at that point, it's not a black thing. We become advocates for each other and saying it's a God thing. And these are God's people, and we have to advocate for one another.
That's good. You know, I've done some research on you, and you are actually an author of a book, Rules of Engagement, and I can't remember the second half of it.
Making Connections Last. It's outside at Mardell's.
Pick you up a copy of the book.
Shameless plug.
I really didn't mean to plug that, but I'm glad I could help.
See you
Gotta
at the
get those
table.
sales up. But quickly, and I'm just watching time here, but you talk about social capital, and when we talk about a city or unified transformation, can you tell me how, can you explain first what is social capital? Because that seems to be your expertise.
Yes. I am intrigued with this term because all of us have it. It is basically about networks and associations and relationships. There is a gentleman by the name of Robert Putnam. If you haven't seen his work, you really need to get it. And he wrote a book called Bowling Alone in 2000. And basically the book says is that at one time, people used to be in bowling leagues. And that's how people built relationships. For many of us, it was the church. So the church was a place where you would go and you would learn how to speak. I remember as a kid doing Easter speeches. I hated that. But my mother would make me get up there and say 3 lines. And so I learned leadership skills and learned how to speak. And so there was a place where you could go and people would tell you, hey, go get a job here. And here's my friend. And they'd build connections. Well, what's happened is people don't go bowling anymore. So you don't have bowling leagues. Yeah. People don't have dinner parties anymore. They stopped doing that. And so as a result, people aren't building those kind of relationships and sharing that knowledge, that social capital. One of the things that Putnam discovered is that communities that have high social capital have high educational outcomes. Communities that have high social capital have lower crime rates. So communities that have high social capital typically are civically engaged. Yeah. And so there is something about the relationship piece that really can transform a community. And that's why if we want to change poverty, change racial dynamics, we really have to build those networks and those relationships.
That's good. So we're learning something tonight. Social capital, I didn't know that. Byron, it's good to see you, man. I actually was going to try to bust out my cool socks, but they were dirty this morning. So he has some really cool socks. Can you show us real quick, man?
I got some pink socks.
All right.
It's pink. It's got
Byron,
it's my pink shirt.
I'm sorry to make you do that. But anyway,
no, it's fine.
I've got a question. There's a statistic about education. So I would say that my friend Byron down here is an advocate for every child within DISD. He has tirelessly fought for quite some time, and he has also served as the president of the Dallas Education Foundation. So his heart and passion is for education. Byron, there's a statistic out there that says that 84% of our high school students within DISD are graduating, which that number's up and that's good. But only 8% of our students are actually college ready. And I know that stat, and I think a lot of us could probably quote stats like that, but why do you think it is that a lot of us don't know how to get involved?
Addressing that particular issue, first of all, 80%, 84% were, and it's been steadily climbing over the past 10 years here in Dallas ISD, graduation rate within 8%. That 8% is based off of ACT and SAT scores. We're looking at 11, 10 math, verbal, SAT combined. So we have a ton of people graduating, and they're leaving with a diploma, but then that diploma essentially is worth the paper that it's printed on.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. Here's an interesting statistic that I think, if you really want to look at addressing that issue, we got to start a lot earlier. We need to start looking at the very beginning of the K-12 continuum as opposed to looking at reclaiming folks who have already suffered from the system that we've created. Yeah. And that's early childhood. Early childhood. Interesting statistic. Your graduation rate, your college readiness rate of whatever school district, whether we're talking about Highland Park, Dallas ISD, Garland, DC, doesn't matter. It will never be higher than your kindergarten readiness rate. Right. Your college readiness rate will never be higher than your kindergarten readiness rate. So if you have a school district with 89% kids coming in able to read by kindergarten, that means they probably had a good early childhood scenario, pre-K, 3 years old, 4 years old, good situation, right? Yeah. Well, usually you're looking at college readiness rates that are about 15, sometimes 20% lower than that. Okay, now let's start at 38% kindergarten readiness, which is what we have here in Dallas ISD. What do you think our college readiness rate is going to be? So if we're looking at really solving those issues, we have to have a collective will to say that we need to change our focus. Our state right now and legislation and just policy delineation, it's not aligned to focus where we need it to focus the most. 95% of your brain is developed by the time you're 9 years old.
That's right.
So if we're going to actually pay attention to reality, then folks need to start paying attention to how our system is structured. And it's not structured to focus where we can get the biggest bang for our time, money, and just collective will.
Okay. And, you know, Movement Day is all about plugging people in and getting involved. I'm watching the time down here because I'm going to ask Noel a question. What are some ways to get involved with education now? I know you have got something going on.
Yeah, we got a little something going on, a little something. It's called millennialsact.org. Go there, sign up. We finally got this website up. It's a place to go and plug in. So what you'll do is you'll go in, and if you are a person who's looking to get involved, there's a place for you to sign in. And if you are a nonprofit organization or a school district that has a project that requires volunteers, also go to millennialsact.org and put in your service project. Okay. Folks will then be able to align what they're interested in with what there is to do. That's one more channel, and there's plenty more. I'll be around to talk.
And please see him if you want to get involved with education. I'm going to make an announcement as well. Guys, we have a big panel, so we don't have a whole lot of time. But Noel, you actually let out the human trafficking track today. For those of you who weren't here, today we had separate tracks, and we actually come together and collaborate and brainstorm on how we're going to tackle these issues. It's the most cool thing about Movement Day. And as we talk about transforming our city, Noel, there's a dark and ugly evil that's lurking in the shadows of our city today, here in Dallas. And it wasn't until about a year and a half ago that I realized that human trafficking, sex trafficking existed in our city. And it was really troubling once I heard about this, that human slavery exists here. Why aren't we hearing about this on the news in Dallas, and why are we not hearing about it at the pulpit?
Great question. I think my answer is twofold immediately. One is the issue of trafficking elicits just this huge emotional response. It's exploitation, it's slave labor, it's sexual exploitation, and we get very passionate about that. But if that passion immediately is not coupled with understanding, then there's not going to be any perseverance in the movement, and there's not even going to be any perseverance to get through a 24-hour news cycle, quite frankly. That's the first part, is we have to understand the issue, any issue we're dealing with, but especially if something as complex as trafficking globally or here in the U.S. And then secondly is we need to just bring people into a place of understanding that, yes, this happens all around you. That's what we did today, because we said, we just went through the definitions. Most trafficking conferences, if anybody's involved in the anti-trafficking movement, you go and there's a lot of passion, a lot of stories, and a lot of statistics. Many statistics which aren't that well grounded in the methodologies at this point. But we started with definitions and said, what is trafficking? What is it? And when you start looking even to our federal laws, you start saying, my goodness, this touches me everywhere. This touches me all around, because it's not just on Harry Hines. It's not just in Bangkok, it's on my screen, because porn is a form of trafficking under our federal law. And we realized, man, the roots of this go deep, deep, deep. So we came to a place of repentance in this trafficking track for our own apathy. That, you know, if you go to slaveryfootprint.org, I probably took 4 slaves to make my iPhone. Wow. What am I thinking about that? About my own media consumption? You know, what am I consuming that is leading to exploitative attitudes? But that's a lot of our journey, and I have a lot of, personally, patience for people and grace, because the Lord's doing a work, and most of us have to come to that place of realizing, man, this is bad, but it's not just in India, it's here. And that was, you know, that was my journey. I know that was part of your question earlier, was what can we do? And for me, I thought this whole response meant go to law school, get a degree, because justice is about specialists doing things. And I think that's the apathy piece. A lot of people say this is about the police, this is about judges. Yeah. And it wasn't until I'm sitting there in law school realizing and looking at the scripture with new eyes saying justice is a virtue, it's not a system.
That's good.
Justice is a set of decisions that I make every
clap.
single
Yeah, that's
day.
good, yeah.
And that changed my life. And it changed my life in terms of how I consume media, what I do, how I love my wife, how I love my daughters.
Preach.
You know, I said today, my first anti-trafficking act every morning is hugging my daughters. It's not going out rescuing, because we have to start in our own hearts, our own homes, to eradicate and undermine this unjust culture that we live in.
That's a good word. Well, guys, we're actually on time. I wish I had actually another question, but I do want to honor Matt Chandler's time and Mr. Reyes as he comes up. But I do want to say this, that I really wish we had an hour, but if you're looking to get involved, and if education is something that you're curious about and you liked what you saw up here tonight, I serve as the vice president of the Initiative Network, and we actually are the ones who put this on this evening. On February 2nd, how many of you guys know where Park Cities Baptist is or ever heard of it? Mark your calendars, February 2nd, 6:30 p.m. We're going to be doing an education gathering focused on DISD. It's going to be 2 hours long. I'll be interviewing, Byron will be there.
I'll be there.
He'll be there. We'll be hanging out on stage. But I'm going to be interviewing the Dallas Independent School District Superintendent Mike Miles. We're going to ask him some in-depth questions about how can we help as young adults. If you're older, meaning you're over the age of 35, that probably just offended a lot of people. You can come too, and you could be 95. If you're about making a change, show up. It'll be, again, February 2nd, 6:30 p.m. Education. We're going to be channeling you guys to meeting the needs of Dallas. Guys, thank you so much. I love you guys. I'm glad that we're friends. I'm glad that you guys are fighting for the city of Dallas and that we're working towards transforming our community together. I know we need their help, and Movement Day is the place that this is going to happen. We're going to get you channeled. And I think that John Evans will talk about that later on in the evening. Give these guys a round of applause.